My name is Katy Gonder, and I'm really interested in research where we are trying to infer evolutionary process from the patterns that we see. And I'm really interested in the tropics and primates, and I do a lot of work with chimpanzees, and that's what I've been studying for about the past 30 years. And it's what I continue to do here at Texas A&M University. And this is Research Geographic, and this is how I think about science. Well, I was born in a very small town in Tennessee, about 150 people, a little place called Viola. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. Um, I went to the University of Alabama at Birmingham, and while I was there, um, I had an opportunity because a master's student left to accompany my professor to Bali, Indonesia, and study monkeys. And so I did that for 3 years, from the time I was a sophomore in college until I graduated. And I was really, really lucky to do that. And I realized that I was really interested in studying primates and, in ecology and evolution. And so after, uh, after that, I applied to a bunch of graduate schools. I wound up going to New York City for graduate school in a big primate program. Um, and I decided to change focus. I was like, well, the conservation issues are very serious in Central and West Africa. I'll go over to Central and West Africa. And I got over there, not really knowing very much. And I got there, I was like, wow, this is nothing like Bali. But I got hooked on the science there. And and my dissertation led to the discovery of a new subspecies of chimpanzee, and then we discovered this river separated these two big lineages of chimpanzees. They've been split for about 500,000 years, but yet they still remain connected. And so for me, like really trying to understand the processes that generate that pattern of diversity has kept me going. So uh, I've tried across my life to kick the chimp habit, but I was never very successful because every time we answer one question, there's like 10 more questions that are equally impressive. Um, so I keep studying that. I keep coming back to it. I did a postdoc in genomic structure and function at NIH. I've worked in human population genetics as a postdoc with Sarah Tishkoff, who's now at the University of Pennsylvania. Um, and I just kept coming back to this question. It's not the only thing I address. Now that I'm at Texas A&M, I have a project that addresses similar kinds of questions, but on Texas taxa, with a very future forward focus on basically on ecological forecasting and trying to predict tipping points, which is important for the future of all Texans, right? And for everybody around the world. I can tell you about the first time I saw chimpanzees in the wild. Yeah, you want it? Okay. So the first time I saw chimpanzees in the wild, I was at a place called Gashaka-Gumti National Park, which is on the border between Nigeria and Cameroon, in kind of the western side of the Cameroon Highlands. And so we had been following, I was with this really famous ex-hunter, his name was Salamu, and we had been tracking chimpanzees for 3 days. And we finally got close enough to them to where we could see them, and get. So this was back in the day. It was in the mid '90s, so it was before they really had digital cameras, right? And I had my film camera with me, and we'd gotten right next to them, and Salamu was there. This is my first year in graduate school, so I got out my camera and I opened up the little Velcro pouch and I set it up so that it would take continuous pictures. I put it back in, and then Salamu was like, okay, let's go. And I said, no, I am a professional primatologist. You wait, I'll sneak up. So I decided I was going to get right up underneath him. I was going to take a picture. So I crawled for like 45 minutes. I was so quiet. I didn't even break a single branch or a twig. And I got up right underneath them and I laid down and I looked up and I could see them. And I was like, okay, this is the chance for me to get out my camera. So I went to open it up and I'd forgotten about the Velcro. And all those chimpanzees, which don't have any fear of humans, they heard this. They're like, wah, 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 and they started throwing things. They were breaking off branches and throwing them down at me. And I went, why? And I jumped about 3 feet in the air. So I have pictures of this on film, and all I can see is like a green blur of vegetation in my eye, like, as it went by. So that was kind of humiliating. Anyway, so the chimps ran off. We didn't see them again that whole trip. And then every night for the remainder of that trip, so it was all guys and me, that all the guys would be around the campfire, they'd be speaking in their local dialect, and I could hear them go, blah, blah, like that. And then, she ran, Doctora, ha ha ha. So I suffered that humiliation on the first trip, but then I returned there for many years. And every time I went in, there would be Salamu telling the story, Dr. Katy, and then and everybody would be laughing just like you're laughing now. The professional primatologist with her 1 semester of graduate school under her belt, Yeah. So, yeah, I have to say that is much of the way my life has been. Chimpanzees are much smarter in the forest than me. I have followed them to outsmart me all the time. In fact, there was one day we had been out tracking this chimpanzee to find its poop, right? Because we needed, so we're walking. We're following this chimp all day long. And then finally we had gotten so close, we could see its paw print and there was like water in it. And so that means it's very fresh when there's still water in it. So we're like, put down the pen. We took a picture. We're like, we're almost on this guy. And then we looked up and we're starting to go. And we're like, what's that smell? Is that campfire? and it turns out we like went through, we walked about, I don't know, about 100 meters or so. And we looked through, we're like, oh, that's our camp. So we've been following this chimp all day and he dropped us back off at our camp. Wow. Isn't that funny? Wow. It's very smart animal. He just led you back. That has happened more than once. That's all I can tell you is that I am not very smart in the forest compared to a chimpanzee. That's interesting. It's like, oh, you guys come from here. You guys look for me. I'm gonna leave these tracks and lead you back where you belong. You don't want them to like sneak away. Didn't want us to get lost in the forest at night. Wow. That's amazing. I just thought that was so funny. And this guy was such an experience. I mean, he had been like 30 years of experience, and the chimp fooled him too. I see science largely as a way for people to connect with nature, right? And to understand the nature of nature. Yeah. And there's something that's been lost there. Like if you think about us as a species, right? This kind of context that we live in is very recent, right? And even if you think as recently as 10,000 years ago, we were living very differently. And we were hunter-gatherers living in small bands, the very strong connection to the land and wildlife and people. And that connection has been lost, and I actually think that a lot of the problems in the world today kind of come from that disconnect between ourselves and nature. And anything I can do to help us rediscover that, I think, is an important contribution to science. It may not be discovering the theory of relativity, but it is helping us understand who we are, where we came from, and how important it is to understand where we came from to understand where we're going, right? So that's kind of my personal philosophy. I think when you're a scientist, And actually just a person in general, like your ego can be your biggest enemy, right? And so I like to try to approach science with and other people's science too with a lot of curiosity and humility and persistence. Persistence is super important. Um, Other things that are really key to my philosophy. Um, I I've worked a lot overseas. In fact, I will say I've traveled much more extensively in Central and West Africa than I have in the United States. Isn't that something? Been to many more national parks in Central Africa than here. Um, and that kind of, that kind of work where it's many, many years and many, many trips and many different people, right? I think that collaborating across culture and across generations and across disciplines, notice I put disciplines last, makes better science. And that's really important. And the importance of science, the discovery itself is important. But the other thing that's really important is a scientist always has to be ready to pass things off to the next generation, right? And that's one reason why I'm an educator, is because I really do believe that, there should be an unbroken chain of knowledge, right, that extends into the future. About conservation, I really think that the future of conservation depends on people seeing themselves as part of the ecosystem. And that's why I mentioned, like, we've lost something, and especially even in my lifetime, I really feel like we've lost a lot of our connection. And once we lose that altogether, it could be really, really catastrophic. But I still believe we're not going to lose it altogether. It's going to be fine. We're there's a lot of young people that are fighting for the future that they want, and I think that that will make all the difference. I wanted to say, during my life, I've done some really messy, messy field work, right, in really, really remote places. And for me, that's what reflects real discovery, when you're really, doing that deep field work with people you barely know in a strange place. So, where like that to me is really important. Things that I would like for people in your generation to know, right, is that I guess sometimes I must we professors look very intimidating, but we're just people, right? We had the same issues that many of you had when you were going through graduate school. And I have 2 kids. My kids are grown now. Well, I have one left in college. um, I have dogs. I do a lot of yoga. I mean, like, I'm a person too. And so I do spend a lot of time thinking about science and doing science all day, and I realize that that is a great privilege. But the thing I'd like for you to take away with you today is that everybody has the capacity to think like a scientist. Many have the opportunity to do science like you have, right? And the most important thing is to really think about what it means to be a scientist. You're observing, you question things, and you should care about the outcome, right? And communicating that outcome. I think that's really important. I really think that the future of conservation depends on people seeing themselves as part of the ecosystem. And that's why I mentioned, like, we've lost something, and especially even in my lifetime, I really feel like we've lost a lot of our connection. And once we lose that altogether, it could be really, really catastrophic. But I still believe we're not going to lose it altogether. It's going to be fine. There's a lot of young people that are fighting for the future that they want, and I think that that will make all the difference.